Hi everyone and welcome back to the garden. It's been a great weekend here, but a nice bit of sun, and although it hasn't been too warm, it's been a great weekend to actually get on in the garden. And I haven't done a lot of planting, but what I have done is a load of stonework. I've moved like the York stone blocks, they're going to form the edgings around the jungle clearing area that I'm in now, and I've also moved a good few of my granite boulders, which are going to go next to that jubea that I planted up a few weeks ago. I've got them roughly into position, I just need to give them the final push now, so maybe one night during the week or next weekend for that. But for today's video, it's a quicker video today, I just want to look at plug plants like this Ensete Ventricosum Maurelii banana plant. Why they're a great way to build your tropical garden this year, they're affordable and really easy too. So plug plants then, if you're new to tropical gardening or maybe even gardening in general, they're basically smaller versions of the plants that you'll be able to buy from garden centres in the next month or so. And you generally buy them as either little pellets that come in coir or compost pellets, or as cells that have formed part of a larger tray. So this one I've actually potted it up already into a 9cm pot, but you can sort of see the rough size of the plant you're getting. This is at the larger size, and depending on the price and variety, they're generally from about 1 inch tall, 25mm tall, all the way up to about 150mm, 6 inches tall. That's the rough sort of range. I've also got a Salvia here, which is a Salvia Amistad, which is a lovely tender perennial which has got these really amazing purple flowers, and I think it'll fit in really well with the tropical jungle theme I'm going for. So these actually came, they were a good bit smaller, and I got 6 of them for $9.99 I think, and basically they're just a very small piece of compost with the plant in, but although it's only been planted up a few days, it's already started growing quite significantly. So they're small plants, but they're ready to go, and they will be big in your garden this year. So personally then, I see plug plants like these as a good sort of halfway between growing from seed and buying the final result, a larger plant that's ready to go straight in your garden. They are designed to be potted up and grown on for a month or so. A lot of these are tender, so they do need to be kept inside while it's still frosty outside. But what are the main advantages then of growing from plugs, and why is it such a great method? The main advantage of growing plug plants, and subscribers to our channel can probably guess this already, is cost saving. So this Ensete, if you bought a few of those, it was from Turnip Tropical, they were £4 each. And this Salvia, they were 6 for $9.99. That was from eBay, from Botanico. So they're a lot cheaper, significantly cheaper, than buying the same plants in a few weeks or a month's time from a garden centre or other online seller. And they do grow very quickly. Essentially, what the seller's doing is they're not having to pot them up, they're not having to do a lot of work to look after them, they're buying trays in, selling them cheaply, and you do the last month of looking after them yourself. But for plants that grow quickly, for me, that's definitely a compromise that's worth taking. To give you an idea of how much these same plants would cost from a garden centre in another month or so, the Ensetes, I saw some a couple of years ago and actually bought quite a few. They were in pots around that size and they were £12, and that's the cheapest I've ever seen them. Now realistically this year you might be looking £15 to £25 for a plant that's 30cm tall. And especially when it starts to get warmer now, that's probably about a month's growth. So if you wanted a few plants, it definitely adds up. And in terms of the salvias, I think really any sort of herbaceous or perennial plant these days, you can expect to pay maybe £7 to £15 in a pot that size from a garden centre. So again, it certainly adds up, and as these plants grow so quickly, it's definitely worth saving that money up. And it's not just for people who are on a tight budget. I also think, well, especially this year, a lot of people can't go on holiday, and they maybe saved up the holiday money from last year to invest in their own garden spaces, which is great. But I still wouldn't spend it all and buy £30 banana plants and £20 canners. Personally, I would buy a lot more plugs, and that way you get a lot more plants, you fill out your garden quicker, and that money you save, you can put in some palms, maybe some specimen plants like tree ferns that do take a lot longer to grow, and you can't really cheat your way there with small plants just because it's such a time investment. Another great reason to buy and grow plug plants is timing. We're now nearly at the end of April, and there's still time to sow some seeds. So ricinus is a great tropical foliage plant that grows really tall with huge leaves, and they do grow very quickly. So there's still time to sow those. More familiar plants like nasturtiums, sunflowers, there's a lot of fast growing annuals that can be direct sown in the next month or so that do fit with the tropical theme or cottage theme or whatever you're going for in your garden. But plug plants are great for those, say, more tropical plants that take a lot longer to germinate from seed. Plants like cannas, if you don't use the boiling water method, they can take a month or two to germinate. Banana plants take even longer to germinate. So it's a great way if you've either forgotten to sow your seeds, maybe you weren't successful, or even if you're just new to tropical gardening, you've got into it this month. I know there's a lot more people getting involved this year, and if you are, it's a great time to get involved now. So plug plants is a great way of skipping out that seed step. Someone else has done all the hard work for you, so you don't have to worry about propagators, about additional lighting, about heat requirements, problems that might cause your seedlings to die off. It really is a case of get your plug plants, keep them somewhere bright, pot them up somewhere warm, keep them watered, and they'll do great. I'm having to be careful where I stand for this angle, because if I go here, you've got the beautiful waggy palm behind me with its tough green leaves. It's basically untouched by winter and it looks absolutely great. It's a very tough plant. If I stand here, then you've got the tree ferns, which are currently a mess of brown fronds and straw. Not so good. We've had a really cold winter this year, not in terms of absolute lows, but just the duration of the cold, really. We've had more frost than a lot of recent winters, so I'll definitely stand here. That's better. Now, the final advantage I want to look at is that some plants you can't grow them from seed. So plants like Musabashu have to be grown from divisions, and buying them as plug plants is your cheapest way to owning them. You can't grow them from seed. Other plants don't come true from seed, and they need to be propagated by cuttings or maybe even micropropagation in labs, which are essentially cloning a plant. So there's a lot of plants you can't buy as a packet of seeds anyway, so buying them as plug plants is your cheapest way to owning these plants in the first place. You've done your online shopping then, you've found some plug plants, or maybe you've gone to your local garden centre and seen some zingy colours that will look right at home in your garden. It's a great last minute way of buying plants, and there's so many different varieties of plants that you can add to your tropical garden that will look great this year. So you've got your plug plants, what do you do with them? And the first thing that you shouldn't do is plant them straight out into your garden. As we're now near the end of April, the ground's still cold, and especially this year more than any other, we haven't had that consistent warmth to get the soil warm, and we're still getting frosts. Even here at the end of April, we are seeing some frosty nights, and that will likely continue into May. So I have done a video on when to plant out tropical plants, but essentially you could watch that same video with tropical substituted with bedding. A lot of these plants are tender, which means they won't take a frost, and some varieties like Coleus, they really won't like temperatures much less than 10 degrees. So just be on the safe side. If you're not sure what the plant is, then grow it on a bit and don't plant it out straight away. I think it's key to remember as well that these are small versions of large plants, which means they're even less hardy, and they've been nurtured at this point in absolutely optimal conditions. So they've had all the heat they need, all the water, perfect light levels, and you're going to put them out into a garden with sun, with wind, with everything battering them, and the soil's going to be cold, so it will set them back if you plant them out too early. They might not die, but it's certainly not going to help. What I do as soon as possible after getting my plug plants is pot them up into the 9cm pot that I showed you earlier. And it's really straightforward. I just put a bit of compost in the bottom. I use peat-free wherever possible. I used to like Jack's Magic, but I did try bag this year to hopefully mix it with some coir, and it wasn't great. It's definitely changed. So really, I would only recommend peat-free going forwards. But I put a bit in the bottom, put the plug plant in, and then put compost around it and patted it down. It is literally straightforward as that. There's no point going too big with the pot, because ultimately all you're doing is giving enough room for this plug to root into and to not slow the plant down. It's only going to be in this pot for maybe 3 to 6 weeks, so this should be a good size. The plant can maybe treble in size and still be, happy in that pot, and it'll be just ready to plant out come mid-May. In terms of care then, the most important thing is where you keep your newly potted up plug plants, and there's a lot of factors such as what plant it is, what time it is, are you starting them in April or May, but ultimately a greenhouse or polytunnel is best. If you've got a variety like Coleus that needs to be maybe somewhere a little bit warmer or have some kind of additional heat, you might find it easier to keep them on a bright windowsill. But the crucial factors are heat, which is generally taken care of by the greenhouse, polytunnel or inside option. Light, you want to give them as much light as possible, and water. So you don't want to flood them, they don't want to be sat in water, but if the plants are actively growing, you definitely don't want that soil to dry out. So as a practical sort of guidance, I would probably say every 2 to 3 days. You want to keep that soil just moist. When it comes to feeding, you can give them a bit of diluted Miracle Grow even, or some seaweed fertiliser, which I generally prefer. But ultimately, there's going to be some sort of nutrients in that compost that will keep them going a few weeks. And as they're small, they don't need a huge amount to get going. So the crucial things are heat, light and water. When it comes to feeding, you can use a dilute form of liquid seaweed, or maybe even one of those ready mix Miracle Grow, but the key thing is don't flood them with too much feed. They're only young plants, and the compost that you pop them in will already have some kind of nutrients in it. So generally speaking, as long as your heat, your light and your water are good, you don't need to worry too much about feeding them at this stage. When it comes to just before planting out time then, which is probably early to mid-May, maybe even late May if you live somewhere colder. I know traditionally it always used to be don't plant any bedding out until after May, but with climate change we're seeing patterns change and these dates brought forward. Realistically, for most of the UK, probably the middle of May is a good sort of, indicator. But you don't want to put your plants straight out into the ground, because the shock from going from your lovely warm windowsill into a garden where they've got the sun beating down on them and the wind battering them, it'll be too much and you end up with leaves scorched, things that get snapped, and the plant would be set back. So you need to harden them off, which is basically just increasing their exposure to these elements before you plant them out. It's really straightforward and not complicated at all, so don't worry. The easiest way is to bring your plants, put them outside, maybe somewhere sheltered with a bit of shade, so under cover, maybe under a tree or next to a hedge, somewhere tucked in by your house, and keep them there. And if the night looks cold, bring them in, and just repeat that for a few days. Gradually you can move them to somewhere sunnier, but again, if there's a cold night, bring them straight back inside. You don't want them getting frosted, especially at that late stage. But in reality, after a few days of that, they'll be ready to be planted out. So that's plug plants then, and I'll give you an update on how these guys are doing, how big they actually get, probably on Instagram, which is at George's Jungle Garden, but definitely as part of my summer planting out video, which hopefully isn't too far away now. I've got these guys that are growing from plugs, I've got a load of plants that are growing from seed, and then I've also got the cannas that I used to grow at the old house, and the ginger plants that I've overwintered in the polytunnel that are now just starting to come into growth. So it's an exciting time of year. Hopefully I've managed to persuade you that you should add some plug plants to your garden or display this year, whether they're fast growing tropicals that'll get to maybe 6 foot in the first year, or zingy colourful flowers to add that real punch to your garden. There's so many different options, and it's a really affordable way of packing out and building your tropical paradise. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.